So who were the first Trinitarians? Now, by the Trinity, we mean people who worshiped God in three persons or three individuals, the three in one God. In the book Egyptian Religion, it says the Trinity was a major preoccupation of Egyptian theologians. The evidence extends down to the late period. So here we have 3000 BC, the pyramid texts. I am life, the Lord of years, the Lord of eternity. Shu and Tefnut were brought forth from me. Thus, from being one God, I became three. And this is about the god Temu or Timu. So as you can see, there's a difference between triple deities, that is, people who worship three individual separate gods. In other words, tritheism, and the three-in-one God Trinity formulation as popularized by the Orthodox Christian doctrine of the Trinity. The Book of the Dead, 1550 BC. So you have those three gods, and they're said to be the triune God of the resurrection. Now we come into the Christian era, or the First Apostolic Age, 100 AD. So you have Beit, Hathor, and Akori. To this belongs one power. Be greeted, Father of the world. Be greeted, God in three forms. So this was found in an amulet, and that's the translation of the inscription there on the right. As you can see, it's in Greek. And there's a picture there of the God in three forms, which is very familiar if you know your Orthodox Trinity. Now we have Marshall, a writer from the 1st century as well. Alone is all and three in one. So apparently the fighters, the warriors, obviously had gods, and this was one of them. 200 AD, Tertullian. He talks about Geryon, the 3 times 1. And then we have Julian, the 4th century, 300 AD. One is Zeus, one is Hades, one is Helios Serapis. Now this name Serapis appears in H.G. Wells' A Short History of the World. So on page 211, after the Greek conquest, the city of Alexandria became the center of Egyptian religious life. A great temple, the Serapeium, was set up by Ptolemy I, at which a sort of trinity of gods was worshipped. These were Serapis, Isis, and Horus. These were not regarded as separate gods, but as three aspects of one God. The idea of immortality and immortality of compensations and consolation was eagerly received by a world in which the common life was hopelessly wretched. Serapis was called, quote, the savior of souls. After death, said the hymns of that time, we are still in the care of his providence. Oh, and by the way, in the book, Did Calvin Murder Servetus? They talk about the Athanasian Creed and how it's a much later creation. To give an aura of ancient origin, it was named after Athanasius, who lived in the 4th century. However, it's a creed never mentioned by Athanasius or his contemporaries. It first appears in Charlemagne's court in 802 AD. There's no known creed by this name predating the 800s, and the evidence such a Trinitarian creed was in use in Spain or France previously in the 5th to 6th century is sketchy and conjectural. Regardless, the creed was not even used by the popes at Rome until the 11th century. The New Encyclopedia Britannica gives some credence to the germs of the creed existing under another name prior to the 800s. The creed was unknown to the French or the Orthodox Church until the 12th century. Since the 17th century, scholars have generally agreed that the Athanasian Creed was not written by Athanasius, who died circa 373, but was probably composed in southern France during the 5th century. The creed's influence seems to have been primarily in southern France and Spain in the 6th and 7th centuries. It was used in the liturgy of the Church in Germany in the 9th century and somewhat later in Rome. As Gibbon, the famous historian, notes, St. Athanasius is not the author of the creed which we so frequently read in our churches, and it does not appear to have existed within a century of his death. The name Athanasius is a designation which cannot be traced beyond the 8th century, and Athanasius was not really the author. This means the doctrine of the Trinity did not exist in any creed used by the Roman Church until the 11th century.